You need to address and deal with the unpleasantries, those aspects of your life that are difficult or painful or challenging. Face the issues head on, whatever they may be, to the best of your ability, and be open to feeling your authentic emotional responses.
Welcome to Gratitude Geek. I'm Kandas Rodarte, and this week I'm joined by a gifted healer who began his study under the guidance of a traditional Kiowa doctor. Welcome, Ben Oofana.
Hey, Candace. Thank you for bringing me on today.
So you learned your healing practice through this apprenticeship under the last surviving Kiowa medicine man. So tell us that story.
One of the last of the really powerful doctors. Yeah, it started even in early childhood, where I was just drawn to Native Americans, and that later expanded to peoples of other indigenous cultures. But in adolescence, I was just absorbing all these books from the local university library that were written back anywhere like 1850s up to maybe 1930s, 40s or so. And the accounts of a lot of these native people, of their way of life, their spiritual practices, especially the traditional doctors, how they would go into the mountains to fast without food and water for the 4 days and nights, a vision quest. And I was just transfixed when they would describe these visionary experiences that they had and the miraculous gifts of healing that many of these individuals possessed. And so at the age of 14, I was already thinking to myself, if ever given the opportunity, this is what I'm going to do with my life. By the time I reached 17, I'd saved up, had a car, $900 cash, and I hauled ass out of Texas. And my car got me as far as Oklahoma, where it broke down, originally intending to go to the Navajo reservation. But good that I ended up in Oklahoma, because I felt a strong resonance with the Kiowa people. And I would sit up in peyote meetings through the night with the native elders. And that's where I met my mentor, Horus. And I was afraid at first that he would chase me out of there, saying that this is only for native people. And there were some native people that were very hesitant to allow me to come in. The elderly Kiowa man who first took me in, when my friend Pierre says, "Hey, Dad, Ben wants to go into peyote meetings." For some reason, he made an exception for me. And after some time, when I met Horus and he was going to conduct one of these meetings, and he actually spoke to me during the meeting that night, even before the meeting. He was standing across the hallway talking with my friend's father, and he just stopped and stared at me as though he knew something. And I think he did. He realized that I would apprentice with him. And so when he spoke to me, it was his effort to connect with me. And then after another year or so, when my grades were going down in college, because I wasn't doing what I really needed to do at that time, I decided to approach him, and again, terrified that say, forget it. It doesn't work for someone who's not born native. And he says, "What are you doing this weekend? Can you start fasting?" And still shaking, trembling, I said, "Yeah, sure." And so he had me drive into the Wichita Mountains, not eating or drinking for the next 2 days and nights. On that occasion, he was just testing to make sure I was serious. And when I met him a few days later, he instructed me to say, when you finish your semester, come on out to New Mexico, where he was residing with his wife on the Navajo reservation. And right off, I began to assist him and see it work with people. And the training is very intensive. And he, like a lot of these native doctors, possess paranormal abilities. Some of the things he did, for years, I was hesitant to share openly some of these experiences because it's hard for a lot of people to grasp. They just don't have any frame of reference. We're living in this culture. We don't have any access to these kinds of things. But I mean, he would actually take like the end of a feather and seed it with portions of his power, what they refer to as his medicine, and then he would project it into my body. And I'd go into something akin to a seizure. For those who want to think that they're skeptical, which I feel many people confuse the definition of skepticism, or it's true skepticism is I'm not going to form judgment either way. I'm going to go and investigate this myself firsthand. And until I do, I will reserve judgment. But for those who want to think of themselves as skeptical, just go to Google and look up photographs of the Hopi snake dance, and you'll see these individuals, dancing in the plaza, and rattlesnakes like literally wrapped around their neck and their face, or hanging from their mouth or from their hands. And so you'd have these individuals that possess powers that, capabilities far beyond the range of what many people would even consider to be humanly possible. And for me too, spending time in China and Sri Lanka and India, I've seen other people do some pretty intense things. So I keep myself open, and if I can, I experience it. I just dive in. It's like I've always felt, from adolescence, like there's got to be more, this mundane life, get up, go to school, go to work, come home in the evening, stare into the idiot tube or scroll on your devices now in this day and age. There's got to be more than that. And so that's a big part of what drew me into it. And I trained for about 3 years with Horus. It was very extreme at times. He would, in addition to assisting him as he worked with his patients, he would put me through all kinds of like survival kind of training. Like at one point, he gave me $30 and dumped me out in the middle of the Hopi Indian reservation with my backpack and said, hitchhike to Las Vegas, make it the best you can. And that was terrifying for me. Get there, not quite sure what to do, middle of winter, all these derelicts coming down from colder parts of the country. And they go to Vegas because it's much warmer. That's how they ride out the winter. And the fact that I grew up in evangelical churches, I just started calling churches up, and I knew the lines. I knew what to say. And so I ended up getting put up in a boarding house and found work. And after a few months, Horus shows up and says, ready to go. And we're back heading across country again. And I'm assisting him as he's working with his patients.
So when a doctor goes into, after they're done the last year of medical school, they go and they do their internship or whatever that's called.
Yeah.
A lot of times they work in ERs or whatnot, but they're basically thrown into the same kind of situation where all of a sudden they've got to figure out how to deal with a gunshot wound, right?
Yeah.
And practicing something in a sterile environment and then actually doing it for real are completely different thing. And that's basically what Horst did to you, was he put you in extreme situations so that you could learn from them.
He did. He certainly did. It was very harsh to get through that. Just I remember one night I literally flew out of bed in the middle of the night punching, and I one of those sliding closet doors and knocked it off the hinges, and or the track, I mean the track that it stood on. But so and I didn't understand as much how to work with my own emotional responses at that time, how to process my emotions. So here I was going through those experiences, and it was eliciting such powerful emotional responses, and yet I was just holding it in my body. And so, yeah, it was very exhausting at times, terrifying. And I felt in many ways it was like we all have this kind of construct of identity that we develop. We're formulating this identity. And as I work with people over the years, I have them standing in front of me, and I hold my hand in front of their bodies. I'm scanning physical and subtle bodies. I can see and feel a lot of what's going on physiologically. They they're dealing with some kind of health-related issue, say digestive issues, colitis or Crohn's disease or IBS, if they, whatever emotional wounding they're dealing with, if they had experienced various, whatever form of trauma, if they're struggling with anxiety or depression, or if they've gone through a breakup, and all that. And so I can see, again, what people are going through. And and a big part of what I do is I work with people is I teach them how to work effectively with their emotional responses. I didn't know at that time. And so I was holding all that stress and fear and and all that within my body. And what I was saying too is that uh, when people go through as people develop, from infancy through childhood, adolescence into adulthood, they're developing this structure, this identity, and I see that, it's like a cohesive, integrated structure of the body and mind. It's, if you do lots of acid, you know, hallucinogens, it's kind of dissolving a bit. If you do way too much, I know people have done a lot of damage to themselves, by really going overboard with it. But training with Horus, it felt like it was breaking down that structure and like it was breaking me wide open. And here I am out there in the world, and it's like forcing me to rely on my instincts. And I felt like I had to reformulate myself. And so after a couple of years of training with Horus, I put myself back into college. I needed time to reassemble myself. And
So what was that like the second time when you went back to college? How had you changed?
wow, it was, I had so many experiences that people had no frame of reference for.
Mm.
And so I kept a lot of it to myself. And and especially getting as I approached graduation, it's like, hey, I'm going to actually have to support myself. I can't just live off of college financial aid. And it's so I start working with people, and I was very shy and inhibited at the time. And there's an older friend, and his girlfriend had broken her foot. And so I said, well, maybe I could help. And they're like, sure. And so I start working with her, and late one evening, and and we used to go to this meditation group. And I've been going through something very difficult, a relationship where I got, one of those get your heart ripped out and stomped on kind of things. And so I would show up and I'd be very quiet, wouldn't say hardly anything, go sit on the couch and but I liked the meditation. and and so I was the cute college kid, and there's this kind of condescending attitude, like, yeah, he's our cute college kid who shows up, who comes to our group, and hardly said anything. No. But as I worked with my friend's girlfriend, and afterwards, we're the next time back at the meditation group, my friend Robert says, I want to share something with you, everyone here. And he described how, as I started working with his girlfriend, that he felt this just intense presence, like this shaft, this beam just shoot down, um, vertically, and and then it just went out horizontally and filling the whole space, their living room. And he was described how he was sitting in the chair, and he said the force was so powerful that he could barely keep his eyes open. and and there was this dead silence in the meditation group, like, oh, we've been the way they responded to me before. It's like everyone's attitude towards me had shifted at that point. I was very hesitant to begin to work with people in the beginning.
Why do you think that?
I just lacked, I wasn't sure that I even knew what I was doing. And Horus said to me, he says, I cannot hold your hand through all this. You're actually going to have to just get in there and work with people. It's going to reveal itself to you.
I think that's true of anybody starting a business. I mean, you're a healer, you're a business. I mean,
Yeah,
you heal to make a living.
true.
So, anybody starting a business always has that uncertainty, that insecurity at the beginning. And,
Lots.
and
Mm,
I saw a video of a little girl pushing her dad down a slide. And
mm.
then she sat down to slide down the slide, and she put her hands behind herself and she pushed herself down the slide. Sometimes you just have to push yourself.
True. Yeah. And over the years, what happened, like there would be all these people coming to me with a wide range of issues, again, digestive, respiratory, neurological issues, people injured in automobile accidents. And initially I didn't have any experience. I didn't know. And but again, people would ask me, can you help me with this, or with that? And it's like, well, I'll do the best I can. And And I found that certain issues or conditions responded very, very well, such as those that I just mentioned, you know, and they're conditions that, again, not having any experience initially, but as I began to work with these individuals and I would find that they would, again, respond very well. I had a proficiency with certain issues like digestive. I've had people, many that have been seriously injured in automobile accidents. And one individual is going through an intersection, was hit broadside, and the seatbelt snapped. He's flying up into the air, body spinning in the air, landed on the pavement and slid, had these huge road rashes up and down the left side of his leg. It's a lot of pain. And so I ran into his mother in Whole Foods and had heard about the accident. I asked her, she said, well, he's sitting in the car if you want to talk with him. I brought him into Whole Foods and there's a, a chair in this area, where, Whole Foods has these sections where people sit down and eat. And this area happened to be a little cordoned off. It's where people would do readings and stuff. It was Santa Fe, New Mexico. But he was in shock. I was like, wow, this is the first thing that's even helped. And it's describing how it was pulling the pain out of his body. And then I went over to his house shortly thereafter. And after that first session, he was able to go back to work doing construction. Other individuals, like with traumatic brain injuries, and that tends to respond more slowly. It takes longer. It's a more tedious process, but it's actually one of my favorite things to work with. I, it, for me, it's very gratifying. I like the challenge of working with people with various crises. Sometimes it could be very difficult too, emotionally, like working with people with cancer. And I've had varying response, because there are times a friend or loved one will call me when someone's at the very end stages. I mean, literally the person is dying. And I go in, I remember one instance, and a woman had, I think it's pancreatic cancer. This is going back 30 years ago. So sometimes I forget a few details, either spleen or pancreas. But she has an excruciating pain. They had her on the maximum dose of morphine. And yet still the pain was unbearable. And so I start working with her, and telepathically I'm saying to her, I know you're on your way out, but just wait till after I'm out the door. Because there's that concern about someone dies when you're working with them, and the authorities show up and am
Mm.
I going to be held liable or something? So, but
Oh,
after,
wow.
Yeah, after working with her, she actually was conversing coherently with me, her daughter, and son-in-law before she was so out of it that she couldn't really speak or make any sense.
I know
And
that when I'm in a lot of pain, I can't form a sentence. I can't talk.
her daughter called me, I think about 2 days later, and said that her mother was sitting up in her bed. She was speaking, conversing with her and her husband. With some help, she stood, she took a bath, and at the end of the day, it's like her presence started withdrawing from her extremities. She had some shortness of breath, and she went out gracefully, uh, relatively pain-free.
So she was able to spend her last few days with her family coherently instead of
One
not.
more day.
Yeah,
It
one
was
more
it
day,
was
one more day. Yeah,
the next day, the
yeah.
evening of the next
But
day.
she
So
gave them 24 hours of clarity.
24 hours, basically.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah.
How interesting. There are many schools of healing throughout the world. I mean, I am not educated in all of them, but Ayurveda, I can't even pronounce it,
Ayurvedic.
Yeah, that
Are
one. That one's been around for 6,000 years. Acupuncture's
Yeah.
probably been around for just as long. I mean,
Yeah.
all these, and they all deal, I mean, what acupuncture is energy healing through pins. I mean, they're working with your medians, right?
Meridians.
Meridians. That's so.
Meridians.
See, I'm not a healer. I don't know the words. Other cultures, aside from, and even it can be argued that traditional Caucasian cultures also have this history of having this intrinsically natural, metaphysical, I'm going to call it neuroscience healing techniques, but it's a long time ago, right? Many, many
Yes.
thousands of years ago. The traditional Greek healers, they didn't heal the way that traditional medicine does now, right?
Right.
The Greek and Roman traditional healing from 2,000 years ago or 3,000 years ago. There is a foundation that makes it believable for people.
Mhm.
But what's happening in neuroscience right now, because I'm a neuroscience nerd, I'm trying to learn as much as I can about it because it's so fascinating. What's happening in neuroscience now is that they are actually scientifically proving that this stuff works. So
Mhm.
2 years ago or 3 years ago, a couple of neuroscientists received the Nobel Prize in Medicine for identifying the piezo 1 and piezo 2 receptors in the skin, which are the skin receptors that receive messages from the outside that send them to the brain.
Mm.
So, and there are products on the market today that work with your neurosystem to affect some sort of change. I mean, I fund this podcast through selling this product right here. So this podcast is paid for with proceeds from sharing this little product right here, which is a neuroscience product that helps your brain address issues that your body's having. It's
Mm.
doing it in a it's doing what you do in a patch form. It's just identified the neurotransmitters in the skin that will send the message to the brain. That's what you're doing. You're identifying something and unlocking what our bodies already know how to do. You're the conduit for it or the facilitator for it. I think that in the next 20 or 30 years, we're going to have a return and a resurgence of healing that happens with people like you. And it'll be a parallel kind of track for traditional, because there is a place for traditional medicine. I mean, I'm alive today because a scientist 30 years ago developed a drug that is keeping me
Yeah.
alive, right? And I am very grateful for that scientist who developed that drug that I have to have every 3 weeks for the rest of my life, right?
Mhm.
But I also am thankful for the acupuncturist who made sure that I didn't vomit while I was going through chemo treatment, and
Mm.
the reflexologist who helped me relax, and the deprivation tank that I go to when I'm feeling a little bit of pain. All these things that I'm doing alongside of traditional medicine are or not traditional of Western medicine are just they're working together, and that is going to be the standard and the model in the future.
Mhm.
You're just at the forefront of it.
Mm. I'd like to see this continue. I have a lot of concern because among the various Native American tribes, as I mentioned earlier, my
Yeah.
mentor, he was one of the last of the traditional doctors, and he was the last of the very powerful doctors among his own Kiowa tribe. Many tribes, there's no longer anyone practicing. they've many of these tribes, there's no one speaking the language
Yeah.
anymore. The language is
And that's
lost.
unfortunate.
Yeah, a lot of the practices themselves, the rituals, they're gone. There's no one doing them anymore. And now some of the tribes revived their Sundance, for instance, Cheyennes and Arapaho, uh, the Crow, the Lakota, mm, but the Kiowa never revived their Sundance. And so
Hmm.
we don't really know what it was like. That's gone. And there's a tremendous power in these ceremonies that were these rituals that were practiced over.
Well, is there anyone left within the Kiowa Nation that even remembers what it was like?
Now,
So it's completely gone.
a lot of it's gone, and that's many tribes.
Yeah.
That's
There's also,
yeah,
I mean, we can argue. I'm just going to say it, and not that I agree with it, but I follow a YouTuber that is a rapper. He's a Native American rapper. I don't know what tribe he's from, but he's a Native American rapper, and it's traditional rap music,
yeah,
but the subject matter and the videos are, dancing and traditional Native American dancing and stuff that goes with the rap music, and they meld together. And then I saw
yeah,
another documentary that most American rock and roll is based on Native American beats and Native American rhythms. The argument, watching the documentary, the argument is pretty sound. I'll link that in the show notes, y'all. This is episode 227. So gratitudegeek.com, episode 227. I will link to that documentary in the show notes because it's fascinating. But that means that it's converging and we're not saving as a standalone culture, but we're converging the cultures together. And you can argue that cultures evolve over time anyway. I mean, the argument is I mean, I don't know there's no way to solve it, but what are your thoughts?
uh, sometimes it pains me,
Yeah,
to be
yeah,
honest, because I caught the very tail end of some things that I found to be very beautiful. Now, going into the peyote meeting, sitting up with these native elders and feeling that presence, that power, uh, and as these native elders have died out, and I don't feel that same presence, you know, and and even the native elders I spent time with, they were sharing with me accounts of what it had occurred decades back, and a lot of the gifts, powers that many of these individuals possessed. And again, much of that's gone. And it's one thing to, to dress up
yeah,
and the regalia and to, dance in a powwow,
yeah,
but in many respects, that's Hollywood.
yeah.
It's like it's show. It's a form of entertainment,
I'm
and
I'm Korean. My mother was Korean, so I'm Korean American, right?
okay,
And right now Korean food is so trendy. I
yeah,
mean, every hamburger joint in town sells a kimchi burger.
yeah,
And a little bit of it is kind of offensive. But
uh,
then another part of me was like, well, people are being exposed to the food that I grew up on, right? It's not the way I would have eaten it, but you know, so it's really difficult because evolution is evolution, and sometimes we force it. And I really believe though that powerful people show up, like
yeah,
spiritually powerful people show up when they're needed. So maybe they're just not needed right now. Maybe it's going to take a generation.
yeah. You also consider too that the fact that corn, squash made their way all over the world. Like for me, spending time in India, and there's the street vendors will be selling corn on the cob. And well, that was food that's indigenous to the native peoples of the Americas.
Hmm. Yeah,
And
I
there
was
were,
in Spain in the 80s, and there were cornfields everywhere. So I
yeah,
mean, it's just, yeah.
Yeah. So there are elements
Potatoes.
of, yeah, elements of the native indigenous peoples of the Americas that have made it all over the world. But and it's not just with the Native Americans, because you have other indigenous peoples, like you'd find in parts of, say, Indonesia or Malaysia or the Philippines, and they possess various gifts of healing. But there's this seductive lure to all the conveniences of our modern day world. And and then you have the technologies, distractive technologies of smartphones and social media, and even going further back, television. And so there's a difference, even in India as well, that in China, those who trained in the Taoist lineages, that it kind of overlapped. There was a martial art and spiritual practice that was very integrated. And so there was, without all the distraction, and you had a lot more time. It wasn't,
Mm-hmm.
life was much simpler, and it was very commonplace for one to do hours and hours of intensive daily practice. Or, for me, I've gone dozens of times through the vision quest, the 4 days and nights alone in the mountains with no food, no water.
I was going to ask you about that, about
Yeah.
what exactly a vision quest is.
Again, typically, fasting without the food and water for 4 days and nights. I know of some people who have gone up to 7 days. Some people say, oh, you can't survive longer than 2 or 3 days. It's like, yes, you can. When they took Terry Schiavo off of life support in Florida, I think it took 11 days for her to die. And there was a order of Buddhist monks in Japan that they would fast for 9 days without food and water. They're indoors. So I believe they are. But when you're out in the wild, when you're out in the elements without food and water, those 4 days are pretty brutal.
Mm-hmm.
Where I go, it's not the highest mountain by any means, but the landscape is so treacherous. And one Lakota man that I knew, he's no longer alive, but speaking with him, and he told me that he had fasted 7, but he told me he had to be carried down from Bear Butte. He couldn't make it on his own. There's no one that I know of that can carry me down, and I'd be terrified to even have someone attempt to, because even for me, trying to go up and down that mountain, there are many times I fall, and it's a very steep incline, and the rocks break loose underneath you,
So,
and
is the location important in the vision quest?
it is, because there are certain locations that were windows between worlds, where they native indigenous peoples went to interact, to connect with these other forces or beings. And they understood that there are limits to what can be done, as that we humans can do. Whereas these native people going through the vision quest is what often happens as you're up there during those 4 days and nights. And I've experienced this, feeling some other presence, some other forces or beings descend into your body. And people would often have these visionary experiences. There are times where I feel a certain distinct presence, and even after I come down from the mountain, I'd feel that presence working through me to facilitate healing within the bodies of other people. And the different kinds of forces or beings are facilitate the healing of specific kinds of illness. And the traditional doctors were known for their areas of expertise. Like some were specifically gifted for addressing neurological disorders, or others for digestive, or a whole range of
Again,
different issues.
sounds a lot like Western medicine.
They had their areas of
You have
specialization.
your gastrointestinal doctor, you have your cancer doctor, you have your brain surgeons, you have your hand surgeons. You know,
Right.
the specializing, and it's true in business too. If the better you are at specializing, the better you are at the at the healing or at the product that you make or at the the patient that you serve. It's so specialization makes sense.
This, in my position over the years, I've had people come to me with everything imaginable. Well, no one's come to me with elephantitis. Like spending time in India and Sri Lanka, you see these tropical diseases, and like the the lower extremities, like a leg or something would be,
Mm,
from like that big around.
what is it?
And it's
Lymphedema.
like
Yeah.
pretty horrible,
Yeah.
what you see there. And in some instances, fortunately, they've found more effective means of treating it. And even during the transitional phase when Native people were being settled on the reservations, a lot of these Native doctors were very open-minded, and they understood that traditional or the allopathic modern medical practices were better suited for some issues. The Native people did not have immunity to Western infectious diseases. The diseases brought over by Europeans,
Hmm.
smallpox, measles,
Yeah.
and sadly, that took the largest toll. Just it decimated many of the tribes.
Yeah.
Where it would kill off, like, you know the vast majority. Tribes like the Mandan and Pawnee that were estimated to be in like 25, 30,000 people. And by the 1900, I think there might have been like either 900 or less than 100 survivors.
Yeah. And what
And
people don't want to hear, because we're really good at covering it up, is that some of that was on purpose.
oh yeah, it was.
Some of that was on purpose. Breaks your heart, but we're here where we are, and we have to deal with what the consequences of our actions, even though we didn't have anything to do with it.
Yeah, I feel a lot of sadness that
Yeah.
much more of the Native population didn't survive. That politically, Natives, I find, tend to be uh, more progressive in their thinking, and so our politics would be quite different if there were a lot more Native people surviving, in this living here in the
Yeah.
United States. It's I have a lot of appreciation for the fact that women and African Americans and people of color basically saved our democracy in the last election.
Yeah. Well, let's just hope they show up again.
Me
Um,
too.
so like I told you earlier, my mother was Korean, my father is
Mm,
white. My husband's mother is white, and his father was Tejano, which,
yeah,
if you don't know what Tejano means, it means
I do.
a
Mhm.
Mexican, Tex, Texas-born Mexican. So our daughter is Korean, Mexican American, right?
Yeah.
You know, and so that's happened a lot in the Native culture. I was listening to something that you had released earlier, and there's something like 1,100% Native American people left in the United States, but there's 900 or 9 million that are that can claim indigenous. Am I correct? Did I
I'm
mishear it?
I'm not sure that of the million that, uh, and many of them wouldn't be 100% anyway, because a lot of these tribes took captives.
Yeah.
It's the Kiowa, for instance, taking a lot of captives, and would raid down into Mexico, and they
Yeah.
took a lot of Mexican captives. The Comanche chief, Quanah Parker, a notorious war chief, and he was half white. His mother, Cynthia Ann Parker, and sometimes they took people of African descent. The
Yeah.
either slaves or freed slaves.
Yeah.
And the Kiowas had this thing about, um, they took pride in how dark they could be.
Mm.
And and so there's this running joke among the Kiowa when they'd see a black person, it's like, oh, there's one of those full bloods. And so they were jokingly, making a joke, and a lot of people wouldn't get it, but it's like, this African American person resembles like a full blood Kiowa because it's dark or darker. And so Kiowa's had this notorious sense of humor. The elderly man who first took me into the peyote meetings was the great grandson of one of the chiefs who he captured a bugle from the cavalry, and and the way the cavalry knew what to do back in those days, they had the bugle calls, retreat
Mm.
or advance or do this or that formation or dig in, whatever their bugle calls meant. But so this chief, he figured out the bugle calls. So he goes flying into the midst of the battle. Crazy guy that he was, he's blasting out the different bugle calls, and cavalry, they're running around in dizzy circles and absolute chaos. And he and the other warriors are like snuffing them out one after
What was
another.
his name?
I don't remember uh,
You know
the
what?
actual, hold on, Kiowa pronunciation, but it's spelled Satanta. Satanta is how it's spelled. He has shoulder length hair and he's a little stocky build. And there's one famous
I
photo.
found his photo. There'll be a
Yeah,
link to Satanta, the war
yeah,
chief of the Kiowa, in the show notes.
yeah, yeah. But I so much appreciated that audacious sense of humor that the Kiowa had. And I had taken a lot of that on. And as I made my way back into the sort of dominant culture, I had to tone that down because I would found myself offending people at times.
This is really interesting. He was born in 1815 and he died in Huntsville, Texas in 1878.
Yeah, he was the story that I heard was that they called him in one time and said like, did you take part in this raid? And he was boasting about it. And so they slapped leg on, the cuffs or leg irons, whatever, on him and hauling him down to Texas, to prison. And he, from what I understand, he jumped out of a tower or something, maybe a guard tower or whatever, and
Mhm.
committed suicide. And
Mm,
he was determined he wasn't going to spend the end of his days in prison.
yeah.
Another war chief, his pronunciation, his name was Satanga, and he it was he was also a medicine man, doctor, and he possessed this power. And the story was that he like coughed something out of his throat and he used it as a dagger, and he stabbed the driver of the wagon, and they shot him and he fell over dead. But he was determined he wasn't going to prison. And so he's buried at Fort Sill in Lawton.
Which
And
is also where Satanta is buried, according to
is,
Google.
oh, okay.
Yeah.
I didn't know about that, where he was buried, but Satanga I've seen his grave. And you look into his eyes, it was spelled Satank. That's the anglicized version. You look into his eyes and you feel that power, and some of these um, people that possess that medicine, that power,
Mhm.
they just you just see it looking into their eyes, that a presence that you rarely ever see in our modern day among anyone.
We actually need to wrap up. I have a couple more questions for you. So, what role do you think that gratitude plays in the healing process?
One of the problems, if that's the way to say it, is we all face challenges in our lives, and we can easily become so focused on what's not working, the things that are not working for us, the pain, the struggle, the adversity, the difficulties that we are facing in our lives. And so when we can acknowledge what we do have, whether it's uh, a friend or loved one that truly cares for us, or if we have some moments of quiet, if we get to enjoy our favorite foods, uh, little things like this, even if we could acknowledge those things, it helps to shift our mind out of the negative frame, because for many people, we could become so fixated in the negative, and then that affects our emotional state, and it can generate more of itself. And I do encourage people, you need to address and deal with the unpleasantries, those aspects of your life that are difficult or painful or challenging. Face the issues head on, whatever they may be, to the best of your ability, and be open to feeling your authentic emotional responses. And this is part of tying into the question that you asked me about gratitude. This is an important practice for people to work with. But when you're facing challenges, and I'm going to use this and feed back into gratitude too, but when you are facing challenges, when you're struggling emotionally, whatever it is you're dealing with, you're in the midst of a breakup or divorce, if you're facing financial insecurity, you've lost your job, you're wondering how you're going to pay the rent, you're concerned about your children, or just whatever it is, acknowledge, that's step one, acknowledge what's happening. Two, what do you feel in response to it? Is it sadness, grief, insecurity, fear, hurt, anger, disgust? What are you feeling? That's two. Three, notice where those feelings are situated in your body, and then bring your full awareness to these feelings or bodily sensations. It could be either or both. Feelings, sensations, fully immerse yourself in the depths of what you're feeling and breathe softly and deeply, following the feelings and sensations as they go through their progression. Because as you do so, it engages, it activates this innate healing intelligence that resides within your body and mind. And you need to be able to digest your lived experiences and your subsequent cognitive and emotional responses. Give it what time it needs. If you're in the midst of a breakup, if there's the death of a loved one, if you've lost your job, the feelings are not going to just vaporize in 5 minutes. They can continue to surface. Maybe you're with those feelings where there are times for me, those feelings would persist for hours at a time, but I would keep breathing with them. And they'll come back up the next day and the days thereafter, but just keep going into them, breathing from the middle of those feelings, let them be what they are. You're not sending light, you're not trying to breathe them out or make them go away. Let them be what they are, feel them fully, keep breathing them. And as you do so, it activates that healing intelligence within your body and mind. You begin to digest your lived experiences, your subsequent cognitive and emotional responses. And the more you do this, you feel lighter. It helps you to become more present, more embodied. It enables you to gain creative insights that you can apply to the situation you're dealing with or your interaction with a certain individual. And so as you become lighter and more resourceful, you're more flexible. It expands your range of motion. But as you get lighter, it's easier. It's easier to be in a space of gratitude. So you need to process the emotions. A lot of people I see, they try to jump over. They try to do an intellectual bypass, a spiritual bypass, suppress the emotions, deny them, pretend they don't exist, or the issues. I don't want to go there. I don't want to feel that. And where I see people get into trouble if they try to jump over into gratitude, or they try to do law of attraction, and they want to visualize and affirm what they want to see happen, and they don't deal with the emotion, then those stresses, the emotions build up in their bodies, and it creates this huge disconnect. Those emotions, that wounding it's never going to just go away by itself. Again, we have to digest it. And when we utilize this practice that I shared and incorporate the most powerful, most effective healing interventions to help us facilitate the healing we cannot fully do on our own, as we do that, we're digesting, we're assimilating our lived experiences, our emotions, we're building a much stronger foundation, we're becoming more resourceful. And then that helps us to get to be in a more positive frame. We're lighter, we're more resourceful. And then it's easier to be in a space of gratitude because we have more things that we can be thankful for. Does all that make sense?
It makes sense. What you appreciate appreciates. I wish I could ask you more questions, but I can't. We're
Uh-huh.
out of time. We're
Okay.
out of time. So this is your moment of gratitude. For whom or what are you most grateful?
The fact that I've been able to do the work that I do, because I know a lot of people are stuck or struggling in jobs, doing things with their life that they rather not be doing. So to do what I've wanted to do, despite the struggles, the challenges I faced, I'm very grateful for that. And the people who have become a part of my life, the fact that I've been able to take the steps, and this ties in with my work, to take the steps I need to heal or to do in order to heal, because I see a lot of people that have experienced traumas comparable to what I grew up with during my childhood and adolescence, and they carry that wounding to their grave. It never heals for them because they don't know how to work with their emotions. They don't know about the effective interventions that will facilitate the healing thereof. So these are the things that I'm most grateful for. Can I share for those who want to reach out to me, like how they could get in touch?
Absolutely.
Best way is to go to my website, benoofana.com, just my name, benoofana.com. And there is a contact form. The phone number, Google Voice number, where you can leave a message for me, it's on there, but I'll tell you it's 332-333-5155. If you happen to be in the midst of a breakup or divorce or some other heartrending drama, and you can download my free ebook, gettingoveryourbreakup.com, or you can book a free call, and that's refiningrelationships.com. But the main link, again, is benoofana.com. Also, you could find me on YouTube. I have a YouTube channel. I'm posting videos. It's quite a pace to keep up with, but I've been putting them up usually about once a week. And I do send out a newsletter that you can sign up for. And you can find that on my website, where you can get my latest articles and videos sent to your inbox.
Excellent. All right. Thanks for tuning in to Gratitude Geek, the relationship marketing podcast for micropreneurs building genuine, lasting relationships with clients, colleagues, and community. Our theme music is track 14 by Rev Brock and Soul Lily. To connect with our guest, Ben Oofana, head over to the show notes at gratitudegeek.com. This is episode 227. I've been your host, Kandas Rodarte. Stay groovy, my friends.
Stay groovy.